I'm not a big fan of Gad. He literally just, him and like Sam Harris and a few others, they literally just trash me all the time and refuse to engage on a single thing I've said. And I'm a big critic of Israel, and he's a Mossad agent. So there is that. That is part of.
You think he is?
He's admitted that he worked for Mossad.
So if you're living in Gaza and you're a child or you're a woman and you're not Hamas, okay? And the idea that you're responsible for October 7th, even if you're one of the people that cheered in the street. I mean, the most recent videos that I've seen were still like a few months old. So I don't know if it stopped. Did they stop bombing? I don't know what's going on.
No, they've slowed down a bit, but they haven't stopped.
In this video, Joe Rogan and Dave Smith dive deep into what they describe as the underlying forces shaping the conflicts in the Middle East, highlighting the severe human toll in Gaza and raising concerns about foreign policy decisions that could push the situation toward a much larger confrontation involving Iran as they break down controversial ideas such as territorial expansion beyond current boundaries, while also pointing out what they see as inconsistencies and double standards among political figures and ideological groups. And they further argue that narratives are often shaped in a way that influences public opinion to support prolonged conflicts, which makes it important to closely examine what is being said and what may be overlooked as we explore the discussion and why it is gaining so much attention right now.
Israel just started lighting up regime targets, just bombing the crap out of them. They were just bombing like government buildings. And they've been doing a bunch of that in this war as well, bombing local police departments, things like that, just creating chaos. Because what they want is what they've been getting in the rest of the war on terrorism. They are quite happy with a Libya model or a Syria model.
They just don't want anyone that's organized as a threat to Israel.
They want southern Lebanon, which they just, Katz, their defense minister, just announced that they're going to occupy.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? They just announced they're going to be occupying another country.
That's what it's about, man. And look, I mean, it's not, again, this isn't like a conspiracy theory. The guys all tell you this in their own words. Benjamin Netanyahu was asked point blank a few months back what he thought of the Greater Israel Project, and he said, it's very near and dear to my heart. Like, this is the point of denying the Palestinians a state for all these years. You can't let the Palestinians have a state, because then how are you going to take that all over someday? That's all supposed to be part of Israel. And the U.S. ambassador, not the Israeli ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Israel is on record saying that God promised Iraq to Benjamin Netanyahu. And that God promised Lebanon and Saudi Arabia and the West Bank and parts of Syria, and all of this is Greater Israel. Sam Harris, where are you out on that? Where are the new atheists when you could finally use them for something? Hey, that's pretty crazy. Is that how we do politics? We work on this ridiculous religious superstition that somehow when God said Israel in Genesis, he was referring to the state that was created that they named after that passage. This would literally be on the level, Joe, is if I named my son Jesus Christ, and then I told you, you have to worship my son. Look, it's right there in your Bible.
Exactly.
That you worship. No, you named it after that, dude.
Yeah.
That doesn't count.
I know, it's crazy. And they took the spot where it was.
Yeah, I mean, like...
They took over, and they did it in a horrific way, like the Napka.
Yeah,
like You listen to some of those soldiers, the translation of some of those soldiers talking about what they did and even laughing about what they did.
Some of them even smiling.
In 1948, 78 years ago. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you're living in Gaza and you're a child or you're a woman and you're not Hamas, okay? And the idea that you're responsible for October 7th, even if you're one of the people that cheered in the street, when you look at how that place is leveled, I mean, the most recent videos that I've seen were still like a few months old. So I don't know if it stopped. Did they stop bombing? I don't know what's going on.
No, they've slowed down a bit, but they haven't stopped.
Okay. There was nothing left, man.
Yeah.
And that represents people's homes. That represents schools. That represents hospitals. There's no way you can argue that that's not horrific.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of indefensible. And in Gaza, like, they don't even really have a government. Hamas is not a government. They don't have regular elections. They had one election back in 05 or 06 or whatever it was, which Hamas did not even win majorities of. They won on pluralities. You know what I mean? And so the idea that you're holding these people responsible for Hamas just doesn't make any sense. But on a very basic human level, like, those are real people too. And when a mother is like pulling her 6-year-old dead body out of the rubble, that's this same exact experience as if your wife was pulling your 6-year-old out of there. Like, that same thing is happening to her. And once you even just admit that, it does just change the calculation. It changes the calculation to be like, okay, look, the onus is on you to demonstrate that this is absolutely necessary. Like, there is no other option than to do it this way. And that makes defending most wars very difficult. And then, of course, in the case with Israel and Palestine, you go, oh, you never even tried to just give them their independence? You've never tried to just let them out from this occupation and see if maybe that will improve things? And the answer is no.
Crazy that the world didn't, at one point in time, stand up and say, there's a simple solution here. Like, these people should have a state. Like, why do you get to control them, but they're not Israeli? Yeah. Like, they're a kind of a country, but not really, because they're attached to you.
Yeah, it's people.
Why don't you guys go buy another country? You give it to them and let them have a country.
I'm not a big fan of Gad. He literally just, him and like Sam Harris and a few others, they literally just trash me all the time and refuse to engage on a single thing I've said. And I'm a big critic of Israel, and he's a Mossad agent. So there is that. That is part of.
You think he is?
He's admitted that he worked for Mossad.
Dave Smith focuses on what he presents as the on-the-ground reality, while Joe Rogan emphasizes the scale of destruction and human suffering in Gaza, describing a situation where a significant portion of homes and civilian infrastructure has been damaged or destroyed, and pointing out that behind these statistics are real people and families experiencing loss and devastation, while also noting that a large share of those affected are civilians, including many women and children, and he argues that it is not reasonable to hold an entire population accountable for the actions of specific groups, especially when a large percentage of that population consists of young people, and when looking at historical context such as past displacement events, it adds another layer to understanding the current situation, while also raising concerns about whether certain military actions can be justified or if they contribute to further escalation and resentment.
The big component that I think all of those guys are missing is that we also create more enemies with our foreign policy. They always kind of caricature my position on this. Like, I'm not saying Islam is all peaceful and there are no problems in the Islamic world or anything like that. In fact, I don't think any religion has truly always been peaceful. But, you know, for guys like, say, like Sam Harris, who these kind of like pretend intellectuals, he spent his entire career talking about how violent and irrational the Muslims are, and how you can't even draw a cartoon of Muhammad, or Muslims will want to do violent stuff. And like, hey, fair enough. But then like none of them ever also go, hey, you know, murdering an Ayatollah might be dangerous.
During Ramadan.
Yeah. It's also the fact that if you just view slaughtering Muslim children in the Middle East and in Northern Africa as like just an acceptable political price, you know, that's just collateral damage. And unfortunately, that happens when we pursue this policy. Like the combination of having open borders, having all these people get in, and continue in slaughtering people in these numbers must be the most insane combination ever. The idea that you'd be like, we're gonna just make an entire generation of Muslims hate us because so many of them have seen what we've done to their countries. And also, we'll welcome all of them in with no checks and we can't get rid of them when they come here.
Yeah.
That is quite a combination.
Whether it's these crackpot Christian nationalists that think that this whole war is a way to get Jesus to return on a white horse, I think that's nuts too.
I would love very much to get to a place where like, you'd be like, hey, let's all agree that we're not on board with the bigotry stuff. And I mean this like whether it's against white men or whether it's against black men or whether it's against Jews or whether it's against Muslims or whatever. This is what Donald Trump said when he launched this war. He said, this is a regime change and I'm calling on the great people of Iran to rise up. And they did. They rose up by at least the hundreds of thousands. They were out in Tehran in defense of the regime chanting death to America. Because it turns out when you kill 165 little girls, that doesn't make a country go, we love you.
Smith also highlights what just questioned as inconsistencies in how Western foreign policy is discussed, pointing out that some commentators focus heavily on certain narratives while overlooking the broader impact of long-term military actions, and he raises the question of how repeated exposure to conflicts and violence might influence perceptions and reactions over time, while also discussing role of influential voices in shaping public opinion, and whether their perspectives are entirely independent or influenced by other factors. And Joe Rogan adds to this by noting that ideological motivations can sometimes play a role in how conflicts are viewed and supported, which introduces another dimension to the conversation about how policy decisions are formed and communicated. And, together they suggest understanding these dynamics is important when evaluating the information presented to the public.
Thank you for
Right,
that.
but before the bombing, there were people in the streets that were protesting. And
Yes.
people were killed because of that. A lot. That's the other thing, is that regime is like they clamp down, and they do it with public figures. They killed a very prominent wrestler from Iran.
They claimed he killed a few cops. That's what the Iranian regime said he was being hung for. Now, I don't know.
The wrestler?
Yeah, the wrestler. Donald Trump, when he launched this war, and there's been a whole lot of just false claims that have been made, but he said specifically that they killed 32,000 protesters. There has not been a shred of evidence presented to back up this claim. The last I had seen was that, I know they were saying, the government of Iran, this is before the Ayatollah was killed, they were saying it was something like 3,000 people had died.
Iran protest death toll could top 30,000, and this is from Time magazine.
I've just seen this movie play out a lot of times. You gotta be really careful about these accusations that are made in the run-up to a war. They're basically saying, we have a source who told us this.
Well, Time was unable to independently verify these figures.
Listen, the claim being made here, right, is that, look, in this place, they said in 2 days, 30,000 people were killed. If that is true, that is up there with one of the biggest massacres in human history. You know, I saw a bunch of the Zionists online when this was first coming out back in January. They were like, oh my God, they've already killed half as many people as died in Gaza in just a couple days. And you're like, right, that's a hell of a claim. But there were pictures that came out. All I'm saying is that if you had numbers like that, you would expect there to be some evidence that you could point to. And there's like one picture where they've pointed to like a couple dozen body bags and been like, see? Look at this. I'm very skeptical of these claims when they're made right before we launch a war. There were police stations that were burned. There were mosques that were attacked. These were not just peaceful protests.
In the past, our agencies, our intelligence agencies, have engaged in nefarious practices where we have conscripted certain people to go and light things on fire and blow things up and create these events to accelerate.
Front page of the Jerusalem Post, they were bragging that there was Mossad within the protests. We're in this situation where we're already in a quagmire. It's already like over a dozen Americans have died. I think a couple hundred wounded at this point. Israel isn't given real numbers on what's going on there, but there's some pretty substantial damage, and definitely some Israelis have died. And I'm sure thousands of Iranians have died at this point. It's cost... I mean, Pete Heggs has just asked for $200 billion. I don't know if it'll get up to costing that much, but this thing is certainly already in the tens of billions if you consider munition, military movements, and then just the damage to embassies and bases and stuff like that. I mean, this thing is already a disaster.
The discussion then moves toward the possibility of further escalation as Dave Smith points to historical patterns where certain claims or narratives have been used to build support for military action, and he draws parallels to previous situations where information was later questioned, which raises concerns about how similar approaches might be applied again. And he also addresses the broader impact of potential conflict, including economic costs and human consequences, while questioning whether such actions align with the interests of the general public and how they fit within previously stated goals regarding foreign policy. And this leads to a larger conversation about decision-making at the highest levels, and whether those decisions are guided by long-term strategy or influenced by external pressures. And as the conversation concludes, it leaves open questions for viewers to consider about the direction of policy and the potential implications of future actions.